Some people would kill to have a 15% cash on cash return. But guess what? I didn't put 40 grand into this deal. I put 1 grand into this deal. That means that my cash on cash return is a big fat 603%, which is so ridiculous, it's not even worth keeping track of. All right, folks, welcome back to Sub2 Investor. My name is Hans, and in this episode, I'll be showing you how we are making over a 600% cash-on-cash return. It sounds funny just to even say that. On a Sub2 deal, we closed with no equity. It's been an amazing deal, so stay tuned to find out what the numbers look like and how you can replicate this kind of deal in your own real estate investing business. All right, so this is part of my Real Sub2 Deal Breakdown series, showing you every creative finance deal that I've done so far and walking you through the ins and outs of the deals. Most of these are subject to, some of them are seller carryback, seller finance deals. Now, if you haven't seen the previous 2 episodes, this is my 6th subject to deal that I ever closed. In the previous 2 episodes, I talk about where I got the lead from, how I talked to the seller, how we structured and negotiated the deal, the loan modification. We had a scary nightmare scenario with potential due on sale. But in this episode, I will only be focusing on the grand picture of the numbers and how the numbers actually shake out in this kind of no equity subject to deal. The numbers on this deal, if you recall, this was a no equity property that failed to sell on the market, and so we picked it up subject to. And the unpaid balance on the debt on this property was $210,000. And he had listed this property for just north of this number, but couldn't get a buyer to buy at that price. Couldn't sell, obviously, because of realtor commissions, closing costs. Didn't want to bring a check to closing. So we bought the property subject to. He actually did a loan modification. What ended up happening with this deal, we had here's the loan, right? The Sub2 loan. The unpaid balance on the entire debt was $210,000. But after the loan modification, loan number 1 ended up being $177,000. And loan number 2, the partial claim, ended up being $33,000. Now, this was already a great deal from a debt perspective because the interest rate on this debt was like mid 3s, but after the loan modification, it was actually 3.25%. So the interest rate, 3.25%. Awesome thing about the VA loan situation here and the loan modification is that this interest rate only applies to this principal balance, whereas this partial claim of $33,000 has an interest rate of 0. There's no interest on this lien. That's what the debt ended up looking like on this deal. Now, our closing costs were roughly $1,000. We'll include that here, but let's just stand back for a second and understand that this house could not be sold on the market. It could not be flipped for obvious reasons. There's 0 equity, and it did need a significant facelift. You would have had to dump probably, at least $30,000. Probably you could have dumped $50,000 if you wanted to into this kind of property to just give it a cosmetic update. But then you would have been in the deal $250,000, and the house then probably wouldn't have been worth more than $230,000, maybe $240,000. So you would have been at a definite loss flipping the property. You could rent this property out. In fact, it's what we did before converting to contract for deed. Renting out your Sub2 deals sometimes works if the mortgage payment's small enough. But if you don't know this by now, I'm not the biggest fan of being a landlord. So we had closing costs of $1,000. Sometimes we borrow money from private money lenders to cover any upfront cash that we need to put into a deal so that we can do, multiple deals at a time and not be depleting our bank account. So private money lender wise, we actually didn't have a private money lender on this deal. And so this, is a great example of a kind of deal where you may not need to borrow private funds to get the deal done. Cash to seller was actually $0 as well. Oftentimes, if a property does have equity and the seller is bent on receiving some cash from the transaction, we will give the seller some cash. And sometimes a property needs work before it can be move-in ready, so sometimes we'll put some rehab into a property. But this property didn't need any work, didn't have any equity, so we couldn't give the seller any cash. So therefore, we didn't really need a private money lender. No lending costs, no cash to seller, and no rehab costs. Besides, I think we put like a smart lock on the front door because we did this deal quasi-remote, so we wanted to be able to give access remotely, so we might have spent $50 or $100 on that. I forgot. The monthly payments on the mortgage on this deal, the PITI, let's not forget that, was $997 a month. So just under $1,000 a month for the mortgage payment. What we did on this particular deal, and this has more to do with favoring ourselves from a tax perspective, was to rent the property out for a time and then give the option to buy to the tenant to buy on seller finance on contract for deed. I'm just going to call this lease option plus contract for deed. I'm going to write the numbers here just from the contract for deed perspective, but just keep in mind that there is a period of time in which we're actually technically leasing the property. We had a option to purchase price set at $220,000. $220,000. This is option to buy price, so option price. If you've never, used an option contract before, it's pretty simple. Basically, a buyer or a prospective buyer gives a consideration fee, some people call it a down payment, to be able to exercise the option to buy a given property at a given price. And this was the price that we put out there. After 12 months, they have an option to buy the property at $220,000 on contract for deed or selling on a wrapped seller finance. Usually we're aiming for about 10% down payment, but with a lease and option, typically you're looking more around the 5% range, plus or minus a little bit. But on this particular deal, I think we got 4% down for an option consideration, and that was the amount of $9,000. So we'll just say consideration fee or option fee / down payment of $9,000. When they exercised their option to buy, they ended up having an unpaid balance in the amount of $211,000, at which point they convert to contract for deed. They put $9,000 down, the way we do it, but you can totally do it different. You could collect another fee at the time of purchase and contract for deed, or you can convert the consideration fee over to the down payment and not collect anything more. They have $9,000 down. They're buying it at $220,000. They have an unpaid balance of $211,000. Now, the interest rate that we charged on this one, and I'm ashamed to say it because it is so stinking low. In fact, I think we probably should have charged higher, and I do have some regrets about it. 6.05%. Very, very low for any kind of seller financing or wrap. So their mortgage payment, their PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, $1,500 a month. From an interest rate arbitrage perspective, we are arbitraging this deal. It would appear to be about 3 points, but keep in mind that the $33,000 on the second loan of the Sub2 loan here, the second Sub2 loan we're taking, doesn't have any interest on it. So it's really a wider interest rate arbitrage. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions about lease and options and contract for deed and how to blend the two. This is a topic for really another time. I can't get into it right now, but just for the sake of the numbers to see what's possible, you could have just sold this on contract for deed right out of the gate, if that helps you simplify it in your mind. To analyze the profit on this deal, let me show you. Our front end profit on this deal is a simple equation of taking what we put into the deal, $1,000, and what we got from our tenant buyer up front on the deal, which was $9,000. So $9,000 divided by 1,000 is $8,000. Not bad. That is more than the standard wholesale fee in my market. So again, we basically made like a wholesale fee equivalent up front on the deal with no equity. The cash flow on this deal is $503 per month. And once again, let me just point out the beautiful thing about selling with seller financing. This number doesn't change ever. It just doesn't change because you have your interest rate locked in with your end buyer, and your interest rate is locked in with your Sub2 loan. Now, let me just point out, this only works on fixed interest rate loans. If you have a variable rate or a balloon commercial loan where that rate could go up or down if they decide to renew, then yeah, your cash flow could drastically change. But when you're taking over existing debt that has a fixed interest rate for 30 years like this, then this cash flow amount never changes, which means that you can scale your business. You can scale the amount of properties you can close and be cash flowing. You don't have to worry about contacting a heating and cooling contractor to replace a furnace that went out. You don't have to have your mind occupied by roofing bids or insurance claims, filling vacancies, or having to scrutinize the books of your property manager who may or may not be embezzling funds from you. There's all sorts of things that you don't have to do, which allow you to scale this kind of real estate investment portfolio a lot faster than the traditional rental portfolio method. The back-end spread is kind of the most difficult one to calculate or explain, but if you're looking at the amortization schedules, it will be clear to you what exactly it is, but for right now, we're just going to call it $10,000. That means that whenever the end buyer sells or refinances, if they were to do that at year 10, which is more or less kind of the average time in which a non-qualified buyer is going to be in a property for, what we like to do is also take a look at the 10-year profit potential in these deals, given that the average tenant buyer is going to be in a property for 10 years. And if you take a look at that whole number with how much we're making, the 10-year profit potential in this deal is $69,000 total profit on this deal. Now, I don't always calculate cash on cash return because honestly, it doesn't really matter to me that much. Back when I was doing 20% down payments of my own hard-earned cash to purchase rental properties, which didn't perform. Back when I did that, I cared a lot about cash on cash return. Cap rate and cash on cash return was everything. If I'm sinking my hard-earned dollars into a property, I want to know I'm getting a decent cash on cash return. When you're not putting any money into a property, you know your cash on cash return is going to be awesome, right? I aim for an infinite cash on cash return at all times. If you have $0 in a deal and you make anything on it, you're at an infinite cash on cash return. We didn't quite get to an infinite cash on cash return on this one. We did get to over a 600% cash on cash return. To be more precise, a 603% cash on cash return. Let me explain. If you bought this house, the traditional method, you went out, you put $40,000 down payment to acquire the property, you would be $40,000 cash in the deal. You'd be 40 grand all in. Then you take what you make annually, which is going to be cash flow times 12. How much cash flow do you make from this deal in a year? $6,036 a year. And you divide that by how much you're in the deal. If it's 40K, your cash on cash return comes out to be 15%. Some people would kill to have a 15% cash on cash return. But guess what? I didn't put 40 grand into this deal. I put 1 grand into this deal. That means that my cash on cash return is a big fat 603%, which is so ridiculous, it's not even worth keeping track of. Now, there's some new concepts in this profit analysis that weren't in other profit analyses. I just want to show you guys how you can take a no equity deal that failed to sell on the market. You can do no rehab to it. You can put $0 into it besides closing costs, and even no lending costs in some instances, although it certainly would be worth my time to borrow some short-term cash if I needed to get a deal like this done. And I'll show you examples of us doing that in subsequent videos. But you can take a no deal and make it into a deal. There's been a lot of interest in subject to real estate investing in the last 12 to 18 months. But guess what? People have been doing this strategy for decades. Creative financing has come, but it is going to go. Once rates go back down, it's a fleeting kind of moment in our modern history. But I guess my point is that the opportunities are out there. Acquiring such cheap debt right now has never been more desirable given the high interest rates that we're seeing out there. So learning how to do creative finance is going to benefit you, even if it's for, just the time in which you're scaling some cash flow to escape your job, or to even escape having to wholesale every single month to pay the bills. At least you can scale a cash flowing portfolio this way and have some time to do other things, to maybe go buy some long-term hold properties. After having done some of these, now you'll know how to structure terms creatively. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. I appreciate you watching. Please leave me a comment below to let me know what wasn't clear to you, what questions do you have, and did you find this helpful at all? It'd be good to hear from you. I am starting a mentorship program to teach you exactly what I do and even beyond the things that I've talked about in these videos. But that is just starting up. We have started already the weekly coaching calls. If you wish to be a part of that, just drop me an email at hans@sub2investor.com and I'd be happy to get you details on the mentorship program. Thank you so much for watching and for subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.